It's typically said that we all have a book inside each and every one of us. But my question today is, have you managed to bring your own book out of you? I haven't. And on today's episode of the Tech Your Business podcast, where we help you make technology of unfair advantage, we'll be talking about how to publish and also make the most of that book that's in you with Michele Barard. So, welcome to the show, Michele.
Thank you so much, Peter, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on too. So, why should anyone, especially business owners, why should a business owner write a book?
Well, I am of the opinion, particularly for what we in the United States call people of color. I'm not a big fan of that term, but it's important that our stories get out. We have been underrepresented in mainstream media for so long. Even, Black Americans, we've had our stories put out there much more, but they also are not fully representative of our experience, right? I've even heard that some African Black African writers have been told that their story didn't ring true because they happened to tell a story about growing up in a household with maids and stuff like that, which is very possible for any ethnic group, any race. So I think just from that perspective, we should get our stories out there. It's very important that people understand there's a breadth and a depth to our experience. We are not a monolith. But on top of that, for business people in particular, it's really important because it helps to establish you as a thought leader in your industry. It's one of the best calling cards that you can have. Not everyone's going to read every page of your book, but they will refer to your book. They will look for it for information, specific information there. And the fact that you have taken the time to put your knowledge, your expertise into a book will say a lot about who you are as a person and as a business person in particular.
Actually, I agree with you on that part where I talked about getting our stories out because I've been an introvert for the first like 3 decades of my life, and in the last 1 year, yeah, in the last year actually, I've been getting on podcasts, getting on interviews, telling my story, telling things because I've been in business for like a couple of years. I've had a lot of things happening to me personally and in business. I've told the stories and funny enough, I have people reach out and say, "Oh, could really relate to that. Oh, this thing happened to me and it's similar to that. So I'm encouraged that you're out of that. Things like that." So I think it's really that's a really valid point, and also about the thought leader part. And there's something you mentioned that not everyone would read every page of your book, and I'm guilty of that. Like I have one, two, three, four, 5 books behind me. I've only read two of them, and I've had these books for
Mhm.
almost 6 years. And so I think with the short attention spans we have these days, I used to be a really big reader when I was younger. I used to read a full book in like 2, 3 days. I can't do that anymore for some reason. So, so you
Well,
mentioned, yeah, you mentioned the books being referred to. So, is that an effective enough reason for writing a book?
oh, definitely, definitely. Well, I mean, think about it from a business perspective, right? You've gained knowledge, you've gained experience. And part of what people do is look for information now. You mentioned our shorter attention spans. I don't know if it's really shorter attention spans so much as the way that we take in information is different now. So there was a time when you used to sit down and read a book cover to cover, and many people still do. Don't think I'm saying that they don't. But particularly for business books, they may read a chapter here and then put it down for a while they digest that information. They may go back to it looking for specific information later. So you can have books on your bookshelf, and I do this all the time. I buy a book because I think it's going to be valuable to me, but maybe I don't have time to read it right away, or I read parts of it. We are used to taking in information in shorter doses, in smaller doses. And I think that's the way that we process now. Unless, I don't know about where you live, but where I live, a lot of people commute, right? So I'm in the Atlanta metro area. If people are driving, when I used to drive all the time, I used to listen to books. So audiobooks are big for that reason. If you're on a train, you may go ahead and actually read a book cover to cover, but most people aren't in that situation in the same way that we were, say, 10 years ago. And especially since COVID, people are working from home. They're not necessarily having that commute time where they can dedicate to listening to a full book or reading a book on a train like they used to. So they'll take it in snippets.
Interesting. And I actually agree with you on the commute part because in the last maybe 10 years or so, the only time I've had to actually read a book cover to cover is maybe I'm on a flight, 6 hours, 10 hours flight. That's the only time I would relax and read one. So I agree with you 100% on that. So there are some people now that are listening to this episode that are about to zone out. Those are the people that say, okay, I'm not a writer, I don't know how to write, so this doesn't interest me. So what do you, let's keep them on, let's keep them listening.
Well, I mean, but some of the people really need to understand the technology that's available to them as well, not just for writing books. You may need to write an essay or an article for, a blog or something related to your business, right? If you have a business, you probably have a website, you probably post things on social media. You can work on your writing specifically for that. And that's going to come from your knowledge. That's going to come from your experience. That's going to come from the other things that you've researched. And that's where you're really sharing your experience with others. And you want to leverage technology to help you with that. And you are being a writer, whether you know it or not.
So everyone is a writer at the end of the day.
Yes.
All right, so looking at the internet, I remember back in the day, publishing a book was a difficult thing where you had to probably type on your typewriter or handwrite your manuscript, send it to the publisher, or the editor. They cut it and then you do the back and forth till you finally get a book with a publisher, with a big publishers. But now with the internet, it's changed. So, from your experience as the expert here, how has the internet changed this process of publishing a book?
Well, I'm probably going to tell you my age by telling you this, but I'm going to give you an understanding of my basic career trajectory so that you understand how things have changed. I started out with desktop publishing as a graphic designer many, many moons ago.
Oh,
And that was literally, you would use Microsoft Word and you'd make things pretty in there. Or you'd
hmm.
use, back before Microsoft Word, you would use Word Perfect and you'd have to type in some code to make text bold. That's how long I've been at this. So we basically went from that to what's called a WYSIWYG environment where you could kind of see what your page or newsletter, whatever would look like. WYSIWYG, for those of you who have never heard that term, and there are a lot of you probably, is what you see is what you get. That's what we used to call it back in the day. And then we started having more use of what are considered to be professional design tools. Back then, there were things like Corel Draw, um, PageMaker, etc. Now we mostly use InDesign. That's part of the Adobe suite to do the layout for the interior of the book. You'll have people using Photoshop and Illustrator to create beautiful covers. And that's what your professional designers typically use. The technology has advanced to a point now, though, where even those of us who know nothing about computers really, nothing about design, can create really pretty, effective, eye catching content. And we can do that with social media flyers. We can do that with book covers, etc. You can use tools like Canva to help you with those things. You can do your interior layout with things like Word still, but ideally with a professional tool. And because we have self-publishing, which has always existed, but 30 plus years ago, it was considered to be vanity publishing, meaning nobody else would publish your book. And so you just did it yourself and it wasn't well respected. Now, even big authors will self publish their books, partly because, well, I'll get into that part later. But one of the issues with traditional publishing is you have a lot of gatekeepers. So that means underrepresented people can't get their stories out. That might mean women. That might mean people of color. Again, not crazy about that term, but people of color. The LGBTQIA community. All of that uh, sector of our societies can find their stories are being blocked, right? Because of the gatekeepers. If they don't like your story or they don't think it's relevant, they may not even pass it along to someone who can make a decision about it. So self publishing has really democratized communication a lot, it's democratized the publishing industry. Social media has helped to democratize the publishing industry so that people who otherwise might not be heard can gather their own audience, their own tribe, and with that audience, produce a book and sell a book and get their message out there, which is really what writing is all about anyway. And as I mentioned before, even big authors, people who've been published, who've had movies made of their books, switch to self publishing at some point, sometimes, because the publishing companies are not necessarily providing the support that they were accustomed to or wanted for their manuscripts, or maybe they didn't give them the control that they wanted from their manuscripts. So it's really helped a lot of people in a lot of different ways in terms of democratizing communications and making it easier for you to maintain control if you are already a successful published author.
Nice. All right. So the internet actually has made everything easy. Like when you're talking about
Yes.
design and all that. I remember back in the day, to make a graphic design, you go into the very clunky and intimidating interface. Now you just go on something like Canva and you have something out in minutes that looks, like you
Yes.
said, really professional and good. Yeah.
Well, it
So
certainly makes life easier for people who otherwise wouldn't even try to create
yes,
anything.
yes, yes. But the thing now is that we have all this technology, we have the internet, we have the social media you mentioned, making everybody accessible to everyone. But the thing is that there are lots of people, a lot of listeners, like myself too, that have tried to write a book, but we haven't been able to get it out for some reason or the other. So, what advice do you have for getting over this writer's block and sometimes not writer's block, but just getting the process simple enough to get this book out in the
Mhm.
public?
Well, I think a lot of people get nervous because they are striving for perfection. And what you really need to understand, I think, is the process, right? So, writing is not a one or done. That's it. You write it and it's finished. Writing is a iterative process. So, what I like to stress with the people I work with, if they're working on their book, remember your first draft is just the first draft. Okay. The most successful authors rewrite their entire manuscript, sometimes as many as 8, 10, 12, 20 times, depending on the author. So that first draft is really so you can start, just get the story done. And then the next draft is to refine, to find the flaws and fix them. You may have plot holes, you may have character development issues in the case of fiction. You may have things that you want to fix in terms of the story, like maybe if it's memoir, for example, you remember something one way, someone else remembers it another way, and you go back, compare notes, and figure out what really happened, right? Or in some cases, you may decide, oh, I've written this memoir. It may be insulting to X and this person. They don't want to be a part of it. Maybe I need to fictionalize this. So there's so many things that can happen through the writing process. And that's writing, rewriting, and rewriting again. So I think what happens with a lot of people, and this happens with me too, is we start writing and we're trying to edit as we're writing. Don't do that. That is the biggest blocker for most people that I encounter. Just write. Just let it come out onto the page, however it's going to come out. And then let it sit for a while. Then go back, look at it again, and say, what can I improve? Let me rewrite. You may decide to rewrite scenes. You may decide to rewrite entire chapters. You may decide to rewrite the entire manuscript. I recommend that process as opposed to thinking, I got to get it perfect on the first try.
I think that's just the answer that even me and I'm sure a lot of people listening wanted to hear, because I think I've tried a couple of years ago. I tried to write a book, and what happened? I was trying to make it look like it would be at the end while writing it, like you said, editing, making it look perfect, formatting everything, and yeah, like you said, the first draft is just the first draft.
Well,
So,
and you mentioned formatting. That's not your job.
oh,
You're the writer, right?
yeah.
So remember that the writing process, the publishing process, it has lots of steps in it, and you're going to need help.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying that you don't pick up skills over your career. I'm not saying that you don't learn a lot of things, and I'm not saying you're not capable of doing it. But first of all, things should be done in order. And second, get help. So after you write and after you rewrite, your next step is editing. Yeah, you may want to go through some self editing, right? But the next thing to do really is to find a good editor, someone that you feel comfortable working with. I like to consider it a partnership when I work with my clients. And you can go back and forth and discuss things. When someone edits your book, you want them to feel comfortable giving you suggestions and giving you feedback. And sometimes that feedback's not going to sound good. I had one guy get really mad at me. He was like, "You need to learn how to give better feedback." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I'm just telling you what is. And I would rather tell you the truth than not." Right?
True.
Um, but if you give the book to your mom or to your sister or to your cousin or your best friend, they may not tell you the things that could be improved. So that's why you need a neutral person who they may like you, they may enjoy working with you, but their job is to be neutral and impartial and to give you the feedback. You need that person on your team. The next person you need on your team is a graphic designer, someone who can do the cover and or the interior layout. You may need both. They may be two separate people. They may be one person. But that part is really up to them. So what you should be doing is giving them a Word file or whatever type file they tell you to give. I use Word. So when my clients come to me, if they want layout done, they give me a Word file. And then that person who does layout will design everything on the inside of your book, putting the page numbers, making everything look pretty on the inside, putting the right headers and footers and all that. That's their job. And then the cover designer is the person who will design an eye catching cover that draws people to your book, because they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but that's what people do all the time. So having an attractive cover is imperative. And that's what your graphic designer does. They help you with that. You may need social media help. If you're great and you're a whiz at social media, awesome. But the purpose of social media is to help build your audience. And so you may need a social, I don't want to say a team, you might just need one person to help you to add to your team. But I have one client who has hired a whole social media team, and that's all they
Wow.
do is create content, create videos, create static images, post songs, things like that. And they strategize how they're going to do that. They develop ads. So it's really going to be you gathering a team to help you through all of these different parts of the process. And if you decide to self publish, there are technical things you'll need to do as well, like getting your ISBN number, registering your entity with your state or local or country government, however it's set up where you live, so that you can pay your taxes, give unto Caesar, as they say, and also collect revenue for your sales. Deciding where you're going to publish. You're going to publish through Amazon. You're going to use Ingram Spark. There are a lot of steps to this process, but it's a process, and don't feel like you're going to finish it just with that one draft.
So like the previous one, this is good advice to end of the day. You should just do your part, do your writing, then allow the experts to do theirs. rather than trying to write and format because I'm horrible with word. So so I just wanted it to look good, and it's not looking good, and I just dump it. No, 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 this is not my thing. So maybe I'll
Don't worry
revisit the
about looking
drafts.
good. Yeah, just type, just type, just type.
All right. So business is mainly a lot of the time is complex, different complex topics. You have a lot of complex terms, topics, and things in business. So, what's your approach, or what's your recommended approach for anyone writing a book to break down these complex topics into easily accessible language for everyone? Because I've seen a lot of business books, especially the older ones and the ones they recommend for school, are
Mhm.
difficult, really difficult to read. So, so what's
Yeah.
your for getting over that?
Well, I know the most about the US market, right? Here in the US, the average reading level is somewhere between fourth grade and sixth grade,
Ooh.
which seems very, very low. The people who will read your business book will probably have no more than about a 10th grade reading level, you could guess. And so you want to use as simple language as you can. I like the concept of analogies. I come from a software training background. And so you always want to try and break things down to simple concepts. And that's really the thing you want to keep in mind is how can you break it's harder when you get into the math side of business, right?
Yeah.
Because math is just math. You have to sometimes talk about that stuff. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, most people doing small businesses don't need advanced level calculus to run a business. So even if you're writing a business book, you probably don't have to do that. If you do, then there's an audience for that.
Yes.
But you want to try and come up with analogies as much as possible. And it's funny that you mentioned this because I was watching, sometimes I'll sit down and I'll watch a show on TV, and there's this show I like to watch called Bull. I don't think it's even a live show anymore. I don't have TV. I just use the streaming services.
Yeah.
So I saw Bull was on there, and I put on an episode last night, and they had a case where they were trying to figure out how to explain complex uh, science in simple forms for a patent law case, basically. And they came up with the concept of a strudel. And there, apple strudel, you have different ingredients: apple,
Hmm.
water, milk, or whatever it is, the different ingredients. And this person put together the apple and the water and made apple juice, but the people were still hungry. So the next person put together the apple and the milk and the eggs and put the flour and made a strudel. And so that was to kind of give an example to the jury, which wasn't going to be as educated as somebody with a PhD in
Yeah.
microbiology and all this other blood science and all that, why these two particular science technologies were different. That's what you're trying to do, is really simplify your concepts, maybe not to the level that an 8-year-old can understand it with apples and milk, but definitely thinking about where is your audience likely to be from a reading perspective, from an education perspective, and from an ability just to take in that information perspective.
Great. I think that's a great one. Use of analogies, because this use of jargon is one thing I've always been against business everywhere because it gives you that block generally where you have even though you understand the words, a lot of times you have to pause mentally to process to get them out. So yeah, I agree with you. Analogies making everything simple. So now there are some people who have been listening to this episode so far. They've gotten convinced. Oh, I think I would like to write a book. They know that the first draft is okay. They don't need to format and and edit as they are writing. But now a lot of them, especially a lot of business people, are good at a lot of things, or they're experts at a couple of things, not just one thing. So how can they figure out what to write about, what best to write about? for their
Okay.
business,
Well, I mean, if you're
respectively.
on social media, I'm sorry. If you're on social media, what do people engage with the most? When you're posting, what do people seem the most interested in? That could be your first book, that topic,
Mm,
or something related to that topic. We don't typically post on just one thing. We tend to post a combination of things. They may be business related, they may be personal, they may be inspirational. What's big here in the US, again, is self help, inspirational, that type of thing is very big here in the US. I don't know about other markets. But what is big in your country? What is big in your location? Um, Fiction is something that people dream of writing, but is that where the money is for you? Is that what your audience is expecting from you? So you can look at it from that perspective. What does your audience look for from you and engage with the most when you post about it on social media? That's a good place to start. Another thing, I get surveys all the time. People ask me, what do you want me to talk about next?
mm,
Ask them, ask your audience, whether that's your mailing list or your social media following, what have you. Float some ideas out there. Try writing some things and getting feedback on it. One business person I follow, he actually invited people who follow him to be on a beta reading team. So as he's writing the book, he's releasing chapters to us and asking our opinions and what could
oh,
he improve and so forth. So and that does a couple of things. One is it helps your audience to feel very special because they're involved in the process and they feel like you value their opinion, which you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask them, right?
yeah, true.
Um, but it also helps you to improve the book because you get that feedback from the people who are going to buy the book.
That's a great one. That's having people read that as you write and give you feedback. That's a great one, and those are some good points to the what the people engage with, and doing a survey, different things. So at least that gives a lot of ideas on, especially your first book, because end of the day, you won't write just one book; you write a lot of them. So
I sure hope so.
okay, so there's one thing I okay a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I can't remember what social media site I saw it. I don't know if it was a joke or real life, where someone mentioned that they were with their entire family in the hospital because they bought a book, a mushroom book online that was written with AI. So, what's your take on those? Because we've noticed that a lot, especially books on Amazon, a lot of books are just spat out from AI. No, 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 nothing else. You read it and you know you're reading Chat GPT. So, what's your take on people who do that, who write those AI books?
Okay, there. I am a big fan of AI. I think that AI. Let me. I'm going to qualify my statement. I am a big fan of using AI responsibly. Okay, I do believe that if it is not used responsibly, we could be setting ourselves up for problems down the line. So, other people have said it who are much smarter than me that we have to be careful about how we progress in this area. But I believe that AI has potential, much like other types of technology, to free people up and to let us be more creative, give us more time to become who we're supposed to be as people. We're not supposed to just be grinding away at life. That's not what life is about. So I think there's a lot of potential there. That said, from a writing and creativity perspective, I think that AI should be used primarily to help inspire us and to help guide us, help us brainstorm ideas, help us fine tune perhaps, and maybe do short things with us and for us, right? Um, if I have something that I've written that's short and I want to improve it, I can ask AI to help me with that. If I have a social media post that I've written and I want help to improve it and make it more engaging, or I want help finding the right keywords, AI should be able to help with that. If you're using AI, it's really important to fact check AI because it is, think of it like a baby, right? It's still, I know it seems to progress very quickly, but it's very much like a baby. It's just learning the language, and it has a lot of information at its disposal, but it doesn't always know the right way to put things together. And it may not have 100% accurate information because largely what it's learning from is what's on the internet. And like it or not, there's a lot of not true things on the internet. Just because it's written on the internet doesn't mean it's true. So that means AI can be learning things that are not true as well. So if you're a writer and you want to use AI, one of the things that I've used AI to do, for example, is to help me organize chapters in my book. So I'm working on a book that's due out next year. And I was trying to think through the organization of the manuscript, right? And that's what I had AI help me figure out. Okay, should this come next? Does this make sense? You know, from a concept perspective, is this the right logic tree, I guess you might say, to move someone through different concepts? So I think that's the kind of thing AI can be really good with, helping you to flesh out an idea. Is there anything in this idea that I'm thinking about? Let's say I have I was actually playing with this in a screenwriting class I was taking, this idea for a screenplay about a vampire. And if I have this concept about the vampire and what's going on with them, what should I be thinking about that maybe I haven't thought about in terms of ways to flesh out the character, ways to flesh out the scenes, things like that, or the story concept. So that's the kind of thing that I would think that AI would be good for.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on those points, especially where you talked about AI being a tool that is meant to free you up. Because when you mentioned it, it reminded me of when you talked about the desktop publishing software, where you had to use code to format compared to
Yes,
just copy and paste. So I think AI is that
exactly.
kind of thing. It's that
Yeah,
kind of
it's in its infancy. It seems like it's made a lot of progress just in what, 2 years, I think, maybe a little less than that. But it really is just learning. There are armies of people training AI to do better, to provide us with better information. Do not take medical advice from AI. AI is not a doctor. AI is not capable of telling you, it can tell you things to look for, think questions to ask your doctor, right? But it cannot give you medical advice. If you get a recipe from AI, make sure that you check the recipe. Don't eat mushrooms that AI tells you to eat. AI does not necessarily know if that mushroom is poisonous.
Yeah, I think yeah, and that's true because AI basically is just a text completion. It just tries to complete text. Most times, it always wants to give an answer if it doesn't have an answer even. So that's why a lot of times I just say just sometimes a lot of the time it makes things up, like you said, and a lot of people have also noticed. So let's talk about self-publishing. You mentioned a lot of people who have been published, who've had movies made and co are moving to self-publishing because, like you said, there is a lot of gatekeeping in the normal traditional publishing model. So, can you just walk us through the steps for anyone who wants to self-publish a book?
Mhm. Well, some of the steps we've already talked about. You got to write the book. That's the first step. You got to rewrite the book probably several times. That's the second step. At least
Yeah.
in my process, you got to rewrite. I'm sorry, some people won't tell you that, but you need to rewrite. Then you go through editing. Now, I am of the opinion that some of these steps overlap with one another, particularly when you're self-publishing. And that's because part of your job then, while you're in editing, is to start marketing your book.
Mm.
I believe in starting the marketing process while you're still editing, starting to build your audience, gain interest, get traction, and kind of build up that excitement for your story. So I am a big fan of starting to market, particularly on social media, especially if you already have an audience. If you don't have an audience, you should be building an audience now. Start now. Start before you even write the book to build an audience on social media, to build that presence. I also believe you should have your own website, because not that I think Facebook and Instagram are going anywhere anytime soon, but we all remember that there used to be something called MySpace.
True.
And more importantly, um, any of these platforms can shut you down if they interpret something a certain way. And I will give you a case in point, because this actually happened to me. Many years ago, I used to post articles about New York Times bestseller books. And so I posted the article, and I use software to help me post some of my content. So some of that content will kind of recycle itself.
Mm.
When it recycled, it posted again, I'm going to say maybe a year later, something like that. And the book was written by someone who was who had done research on the Nazis, and was talking about the history and why they were the way they were, and how they, the whole movement, and just how they were terrible. um, and one of the things that the author postulated was that there was drugs involved and things like that. And this book was on the New York Times website. That's where I got the article. And I was just sharing about interesting books on the page. Well, when it reposted, Facebook locked me out of my page, saying that I had violated their terms and conditions. And I had to spend hours and hours and hours trying to contact a human being at Facebook saying, how did I violate your terms and conditions? This is a book review of a book, and this is from the New York Times. The book happens to be about the Nazis. It is not that it is saying Nazis are good. It's not promoting being a Nazi or anything like that. It's literally a review of a book.
Yeah.
And it took hours of my life. I should invoice people for that time. Hours of my life to get them to unlock my page. And it's because these big companies are using software, AI type software, to analyze what gets posted, which can be good. And it has its limitations. So if you're just doing a keyword search for Nazi and you don't distinguish if this is an academic type book about this, then you're saying this is something bad just because of that one word. That's a problem. You get locked out of your page. Guess what? People can still find you because you have a website.
True.
So you don't want to make yourself vulnerable because you're starting a business when you write a book. And you don't want to make your business vulnerable to the whims of keyword searches or somebody hacking your page or what have you. Have a website as well. All of these things go into your marketing, and your marketing should start in parallel before you publish so that you can build up your audience. So you want social media, you want website, and you want to start developing your book cover at the same time. Again, these are overlapping because these are all things that can be used in your marketing.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you're editing, you finish your revising, you're editing your book. After editing, you go into layout. Layout is where they design the interior of your book. Once that interior is done, once that cover is done, then you can actually publish. You'll need to decide who you're going to publish with. A lot of people go with Amazon. Ingram Spark is another one that's popular. I think there's one called Snowfall Press. There's so many of these. Book Baby, tons of these companies that do that. You pick the one that's best for you, or you work with whoever's your editor, publisher, whatever that you're working with. You may go with a hybrid company. I work with a company called Emerald Books, and they work with authors to help them publish their books, and they take care of the majority of that stuff for them for a fee. And then they help them with setting up their Ingram account and getting that done. So there are a variety of ways to do that part. And marketing is the most important part of this process if you ever want to build your audience, sell your book, and then move forward in your career as a writer. That's probably the most important part. Marketing does not just go until the book is released, it is an ongoing process.
That's interesting, and that's an interesting angle to start marketing when the book is being edited. So you have your get your website, get your social media, get your book cover, start promoting it before. I think that's advice everyone writing the book should take very serious. So a lot of, at the beginning of the podcast when I asked why anyone should write a book, you mentioned that it's a way for them to generate business opportunities and all that. So for anyone who is writing a book or has written a book, how can they position this book or how can they use this book to actually generate these leads to make it more probable or more likely that they're going to generate these leads or
Mhm.
these opportunities for their business?
Well, first of all, anytime you have written a book, particularly about specific business topics, you have the opportunity to become a speaker on top of it. So, having your book as a calling card, you can start with your local chamber of commerce. I've written this book. I'm an expert in this area. I would like to have the opportunity to speak to your audience. And I can almost guarantee you that out of those speaking engagements, you will get, if not business right then, you will develop business contacts that will help you get business down the line. Now, business is not something that is an immediate, you may see some immediate success, but it's really about relationships. It's about developing those relationships and getting your name out there associated with certain things. And whatever your topics are, that's where your opportunities are going to come in later. Someone you met 6 years ago may run into someone who says, "Oh, I needed someone who does blah, blah, blah." You know what? I remember hearing this person speak at the, I don't know, Chamber of Commerce, the Kiwanis Club, whatever. And they do that. Let me dig up their business card. Wait, I think I have their contact information in my phone. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you'd be surprised how the business opportunities actually end up coming to you. And so, speaking engagements, you can pitch yourself to podcasts like this one. This is a wonderful
Yeah.
podcast to pitch yourself to. And someone in the audience may have a need for what you do or know someone who has a need for what you do. So that's why I say, I think we sometimes think in a very limited fashion, like, oh, I write this book, then what? Well, yeah, but people are going to come to know your name associated with that topic, even if they don't read the whole book. Just seeing your name on a book improves your chances of being remembered later when they need that service or someone else needs that service or product.
Yeah, and coincidentally, the episode that's live now is from an author. So, yeah. So you're actually right. So I think we've had a very interesting chat so far. I usually do this in the beginning, but I decided to bring this to the end. So can you just give us a quick overview of yourself, your background, and how you got into writing, editing, into the book world?
Well, I started Urban Book Editor in 2012. And it really was in response to, I became a volunteer reviewer for a website called the Urban Book Source. And they would send me like 3 or 4 books, and I'd sit down and read them and write my reviews. And I found myself at the end of every review saying, "Edit, edit, edit," because it was distracting, it was distressing. And I'm reading all these really interesting stories, but there were glaring errors in the books. And then I said, "Michelle, by complaining about it, you're just being part of the problem, be part of the solution." And so that's why I started Urban Book Editor. Urban Book Editor, I did that for many, many years. And I worked with mostly self published authors. I sometimes did work for other publishing companies. I would edit books, sometimes do layout, because, like I said, my background is computer graphics. So I actually can do editing, layout, cover design, And marketing because of my business background, so I can do the marketing plans and social media. So I just happen to have one of those jack of all trades kind of backgrounds.
Yeah.
But that's not the norm. But I say all that to say I did that for many, many years. And I found over time I was doing more coaching, more marketing, marketing plan development, social media press releases, that kind of thing. So I thought, let me actually start doing business under my name. So I now have a website, michellebarard.com, and instead of Urban Book Editor. So Urban Book Editor is in the process of being kind of refocused to be more of a resource site. And I provide my services on michellebarard.com. And recently have kind of changed my focus to focus more on Black women over 50 in particular, which is actually my demographic, because I think that we have so much knowledge, so much experience that we could share with younger generations of women. And we just aren't getting our stories out there. It's really important that we do that. We used to have a society, at least here in the US, we used to have a society where people tended to stick a little closer to home. You were tied more to your family, and those elders were there to guide you. Now, I think we really need to think about being elders in a different way, that maybe we aren't just going to be elders to the younger people in our own families. Maybe we need to be elders to our communities and share our stories so that they can learn and do better. So that's really where my focus has been going in recent years.
That's interesting. So, for those who have been listening, maybe they want to learn about more about writing, they want to learn about self-publishing before starting writing their book. Are there any resources or tools you recommend for them to do that?
Well, there are tons of articles. I love Writer's Digest. I love it, love it, love it. I use it all the time. There's also a website I like called Campfire. Um, I think it's called Campfire Writing. I just know it as Campfire. But they also have an app. It's a really good writing tool. What I love about that particular site is that it's great for world building. So if you're into fiction and especially fantasy and stuff like that, that's a great place to help you think about, well, what is your magical world like? What do you need to make up a language for your people? So that's really for those uber creative types who want to do fantasy type work. If you're working on memoir, I recommend reading a lot of memoirs or listening to a lot of memoirs. Some of my favorites have been the Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. Her book is really good. I love Shonda Rhimes wrote a book called My Year of Yes. I'm telling my age when I say I like the books by the Brat Pack folks. Rob Lowe wrote a really good book. Matt McConaughey's book is very good. So there are a lot of really good memoir out there that you can read and listen to kind of get a sense of what the structure might be like, or different ways you might approach memory and how you might communicate some of those things, especially some of the more difficult topics, right? So there are those things. And of course, just generally learning about writing, I'm happy to meet with you. I am, in fact, for your audience, offering a free consultation call. They can go to michellebarard.com/free call and schedule a 15-minute consultation with me free of charge. And I also offer a course called Write, Publish, Thrive. And that is another resource that I think is very valuable. And I tried to price at a very reasonable level and offer a payment plan on that, where we talk about everything from the writing all the way through the marketing. So those are some of the things that I would recommend.
Okay, so I used to enjoy Reader's Digest when I was younger. I never knew there was a Writer's Digest too. And yeah,
Oh, it's a wonderful site. You have to
I'm
check it
dating my
out.
age. with with that. All right. So for the listeners, for the watchers, you have it on the screen right now. michellebarard.com/free call. If you want to talk to Michelle about writing your book, you want to learn more, we can talk about this all day, but we just have a limited time. So if you want to continue this conversation, michellebarard.com/free call. She also has, of course, Write, Publish, Thrive. So the her link would be on the show notes, in the show notes, and on the screen once this goes live. So thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on the Tech Your Business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a fun conversation.
Thank you. So for the listeners, did you get any value from this episode? If you did, please share with anybody who is struggling to write their book, to start their book, and maybe they've gotten the book out, they don't know how to market it, or maybe they've written the book and they want it to look pretty like me or anything. Just share this episode with them. And if you want to be the first person to know when we post more helpful content like this for your business, don't forget to follow, like, share, and wherever you're seeing us, wherever you're hearing us on. So this will be episode 95. I hope I have the number right. We are almost at episode 100. So that means you have 94 other episodes before we come out with a new one next week. So thank you so much for listening, staying with us up to this point. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on. And bye for now.